Mr. Keith. I will be very short, but I do need to ask permission to do a little wider than the 2 or 3 questions I was going to ask. I shouldn't be too long.
Well, we have to finish by 5 at the very latest, Mr. Metzer.
I'll do my
sorry,
very
you've got your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Professor Horby, first, can you confirm that NervTAC advised that identifying the end of symptoms may be very prolonged or very difficult to define on the 6th of March 2020 and specifically discussed ongoing clinical issues post-COVID and the potential need for a clinical forum on the 15th of May?
Yes, correct, we did.
Thank you. Can you outline NervTAC's discussions on long COVID and the outcome of the discussions? We note, and I'm not going to take you to the minutes of NervTAC, show that long COVID was only first mentioned on the 4th of September 2020, and that during the course of that meeting, the issue of long COVID was raised, and the minutes note, should NervTAC look at this and have a view? The question is, the action was for you, Professor Horby, to discuss with Jonathan Van Tam whether advice was needed for NervTAC on long COVID. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. And why, when discussions on clinical issues post-COVID were identified by NervTAC back in May 2020, was long COVID only discussed in September of that year?
So the quotes that you gave from May were really about when we should define a point for quarantine or isolation of patients, the start of illness or the end of illness. Should somebody stay in quarantine for 7 or 14 days after start of illness, or 4 to 7 days after end of illness? And the clinicians amongst us on the committee noted that there can be long-term symptoms like chronic cough, etc., fatigue, which make it quite difficult to define an end point. And so that was the context for that discussion. It wasn't a context about what are the longer-term complications of COVID, and you're right, that wasn't really raised until quite a lot later.
Thank you. Are you able to comment on the ISARIC long COVID study when it was established, whether it was launched in response to SAGE 29's discussions, and why it was not why you didn't mention ISARIC's work on long COVID in your witness statement?
Yes, thank you for that. It's a good point. We did start to engage on long COVID through ISARIC towards sort of late summer. We engaged with the long COVID survivors group, and they were co-developers of the long COVID protocol, which we have established, and data is being collected on that. But you're right, it's an omission from the evidence statement.
Thank you. And lastly, areas that were given permission for previously. Professor Brightling and Dr. Evans, in their expert report on long COVID, commend ISARIC's study as describing as a hibernating observational study of people hospitalised for an acute infection that was trial ready at the onset of the pandemic. Do you agree that the focus of ISARIC, WHO, the CCP, and on ISARIC 4C were on patients suffering from acute COVID-19?
Yes, that's correct.
And could surveillance of long-term sequelae have been built into the sleeping observational study that was trial ready at the start of the pandemic?
Yes, it could have done, and we intend to do that in the future.
Thank you. And lastly, Professor Brightling and Dr. Evans also gave evidence to the inquiry that the risk of long-term sequelae was foreseeable before the COVID-19 pandemic based on evidence of post-viral sequelae from both MERS and SARS. If ISARIC was developed in 2012 and activated for MERS, do you accept that the absence of monitoring long-term sequelae initially was a blind spot of ISARIC?
Having personally seen SARS cases and avian flu cases and worked closely with people who see MERS cases, long-term sequelae were not highlighted as a common or major problem. They were recognised but weren't seen to be a major common problem. So I think at that time we may have underappreciated it, but I don't see that we were missing sort of historic data that made us think that this would be a major issue.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Horby. Thank you, my lady.
Thank you, Mr. Metzer.
Thank you.